Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ajene Livingston, and I'm honored to be here with you today alongside Reverend Dr. Foreman Gunter. Today's conversation isn't just about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's about leadership in a new era. In an environment where political winds shift and social needs grow sharper, DEI work isn't just an add-on or a program or a initiative. It's essential to our relevance, our resilience, and it is our responsibility. So thank you all for joining. I would like us to take a moment or two to just introduce ourselves, just give our name and what organization we represent. Like I said, I am Ajene Livingston. I am a outreach officer for the Chester County Community Foundation, but I'm also the Senior Director for Strategic Relationships at the Alliance for Health Equity. Now I'm going to pass it to my colleague and very good friend, Dr. Richelle Foreman Gunter.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reverend Dr. Richelle Foreman Gunter. I am currently the president of the Westchester branch of the NAACP, the leader for social justice at St. Paul's Baptist Church, and I serve on a number of regional boards. I come from a background of over 27 years of serving in agencies that provide health services across the spectrum. And I am delighted to be here today to talk about board leadership and to talk about the real ability to meet the needs of the people that we serve when we create board leadership that really reflects who we are and what we're doing in our communities. So I'm happy to be here today. I think we're going to do some brief introductions. So I would ask each of you to just take a bit of time to introduce who you are and maybe why you came today. Let's start with, I'm going to pass the mic to Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan Sutherland. I sit on the board of directors for the Colonial Theater in Phoenixville. This is my first board position, but I believe that I will be the board president in a few months. And so I need to start learning what I need to know. Thank you for doing this. It's tremendous. Thanks.
Megan, do you want to pass the mic to someone?
Absolutely. I'm going to pass it to Donna.
Good morning. My name is Donna Hostler. I have a bookkeeping firm, Office Self Bookkeeping. I work with a lot of nonprofits in Oxford. So I just try to take every class I can and learn every single thing I can so that I can help guide them when they need help. So I'm not a true board person. Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Stevens. I'm with the Chester County Community Foundation. I'm the grants director over here. And I'm going to pass it to Donna.
Donna Doherty, I'm the president of the Players Club of Swarthmore. I'm always interested in DEI seminars and webinars, especially in these challenging times. I will pass to, let's see who's next. Maybe?
Donna, I don't think we heard you.
No.
Who were you passing it to?
Did you hear what I said? Anything I said?
We did.
Okay.
We heard your introduction. We just didn't hear the pass off.
I passed to Kurt.
Kurt.
Okay, and to unmute. Hi, I'm Kurt Hammett. I live in Richmond, Virginia, but I'm on the board of Glorified Performing Arts, which is a contemporary Christian ballet company in Westchester, Pennsylvania. So this is my first role on the board. My daughter, in fact, is the first soloist for that group, and I'm glad to be here.
Kurt, who are you passing to?
Hey, let's see. Brian Doyle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Doyle. I'm a staff attorney with Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania, and I'm just recently joined the board of the Crime Victim Center of Chester County. And these trainings are really great to learn all about what goes into being a board member. So thanks for hosting them. Oh, and I joined a few minutes late, so I'm not sure who hasn't introduced themselves yet to pass to.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
I can go.
Thank you.
I'm Carrie Snow. I'm the Senior Director of Culinary Operations and Workforce Development here at the Chester County Food Bank. And I am on this call because I sit on the board of Meals on Wheels for Chester County. And I will pass this on to Robin.
Robin, are you there?
I can pass it to Sasha.
Thank you.
Okay, hi, Sasha responded in the chat. She's here, but she's in listen mode only. Thank you, Sasha, for sharing that in the chat. Robin, are you there either in the chat or can we hear from you? Sasha sits on the board of Brandywine Valley Active Aging. Thank you, Sasha. Well, I'm guessing that Robin might have stepped away. So I think, Ajene, we can move on.
All right, beautiful. Today we will focus on 4 pivotal questions. 1, are we ready for deeper diversity? 2, what internal practices block us? 3, where do we make mistakes in recruiting and retaining diverse leaders? And finally, how do we build authentic, lasting relationships that power change? Like I started off opening saying that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a initiative, but it is essential to how we run an organization, how we operate, and how we lead. Of course, we know that in this climate of budget cuts, if I only have one revenue stream, that is not a viable model. So we must diversify our financial portfolio if we are to be sustainable. And that is essentially the model for how we govern, how we run, how we live. It cannot just be one, it must be diverse. So a part of this work is us developing and learning and growing as leaders and organizations, not only to just adapt to the times, but also to better ourselves as organizations. So if we remove diversity, equity, and inclusion from a program and from an initiative to the essential way of how we operate, that is truly how we will be sustainable and viable organizations. Dr. Gunter, I'm going to pass this to you.
Okay. One of the things that Ajene and I talked about is the work of creating a board that really moves nonprofits forward is constant. And often when we're thinking about the board's needs, we think in terms of people that we need, diversity that we think will make us better, people who will bring real assets to our boards. But often we're not really prepared to take those steps to actually bring people on the board because we don't necessarily assess what we have on the board already. And so we of course are looking for people who are passionate about our cause. We're looking for people who are expert in the work that we're doing and bring resources. But when we ask the question, are we really looking for people who bring a different perspective than ours? Sometimes we don't end up on the same page. It's easy to move to people who think the way we do and share our perspectives and have the same goals. But it can be extremely helpful to have someone who, while they might share our goals, might have a different way of thinking about how we achieve those goals. And the richness in diverse perspectives, in diverse experience, can help us think, I think, in a way about our goals that bring something, not takes away something. So when boards talk about embracing diversity, I think it's really important to understand, how do you know you're really ready for diversity? What kinds of assessments are you doing? What kinds of ways are you examining the challenges that a diverse board will bring, and how to manage that? It really is about embracing differences. And for many of us, that is not just something to be said, but the real challenge is, how do you dig deep to bring those diverse experiences and those differences really onto your boards? I think it's really of utmost importance that that's a conversation that is held continuously, often. It's not a one and done. It's something that you're constantly testing. Are we really ready for differences in perspectives, difference in approaches? And for most of us, we're not always as prepared as we could be. So that's the work that I encourage. Let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dr. Gunter.
I was going to say, this is a good example of identifying board prospects. You can see in this example that it's really important. If we bring on people whose thinking is so similar to ours, we're likely to result in the same outcome. And it's really important to start with something new. Often we think of diversity across a single plane, like I'm looking for someone who's from a different community. I'm looking for someone who's from a different background. And those are great ways to look at to start. But we really do have to dig in to prospective members, get to know them, and really have some appreciation for the fact that they approach things in different ways. And in that way, we bring people from sort of across our networks, from the people that we serve, from our current board members, even from employees and volunteers and folks who attend our events. Those are great places to start when you're thinking about building a network that is diverse and that includes more people than we normally would have an opportunity to draw from.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I just wanted to jump in here and reiterate the idea of self-reflection and readiness. And Dr. Gunter said that, before we talk about how to diversify, that we need to look inward and really decide, are we truly ready for diversity? And the kind of diversity that touches every part of our organization, not only our board, but our staff, our vendors, our programs, our fundraising practices. Some of you might be familiar with the historic Kennett Underground Railroad Center. A little time ago, they realized that while their programming told stories of liberation, their vendor and donor base didn't truly reflect the community's diversity. So what they started to do was intentionally sourcing materials from Black-owned businesses that shifted their storytelling to highlight lesser known freedom seekers. And so this wasn't just about optics, it wasn't just about checking the box, it really deepened their mission. So this readiness that we're talking about is transformative and not transactional. So when we identify these prospects, it's really not about checking the boxes. It's really about transforming the organization. So I just wanted to add that there. And I will also share one more story about the barriers. Um, every organization has practices and has barriers, and we sort of, in our gatekeeping roles, we try to open the door, but sometimes, that door is half closed, it's half ajar, the window is cracked, and things of that nature. So Westchester University's foundation had an internal review where they found that new board members were transparent and shared that they felt isolated because informal networking happened after board meetings and at places where they didn't feel welcome.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how we have to think about how our practices, how are we intentionally opening the door and doing and involving the processes. So the fix for that wasn't really complex. You structure network mixers, you intentionally have a buddy system, or you add inclusive social workspaces to increase the self-awareness, which is the first step, and identifying what informal habits might your organization be carrying that are blocking belonging when you start to identify these prospects. I think we can go. Yep, thank you.
So when we talk about recruiting, I've worked for 22 years with an organization that had 5,000 employees and was headquartered in Philadelphia, but located in 15 states. And the board there was almost always exclusively recruited from the Philadelphia area. And so there was no attempt to recruit board members from the areas and the other states where we were providing services. And that made it really hard for our board members to really understand how services were delivered in that area. And when we may not be talking about boards, agencies that are that broad or that big, but I think it really is important to recruit very intentionally based on where you know that you're providing services, what communities you know are receiving your services, where our employees come from. And so it's not by accident that it's really an attempt to meet people who have skills across a broad spectrum that's really based in the work that the nonprofit does. And it's really important not to necessarily recruit people that we know well. That doesn't mean that we don't recruit anybody that we know, but it's more likely that in recruiting people that are close to us, we're losing an opportunity for diverse perspectives. We're bringing in people that we know, we're very comfortable with, and we know think the way that we do. And while they might have different skills and different qualifications, it's not a diverse perspective. And so we don't want to recruit by accident. We do want to be intentional about looking at experiences that are different from our own and non-traditional. And we do want to be sure that in our attempt to recruit intentionally, that we are preparing our existing boards for something different. And so the work is both internal, we talked a bit about that, and external, but it's not by accident. It is really by design. And so we're looking at people who are vendors, we're looking at people that we serve, we're looking at the families that are impacted by our service, but we're looking with this specific intention to recruit as broadly as we can.
Thank you. What I forgot to mention at the beginning when we opened is that we are fortunate enough, we only have an hour together, but our group is small enough that we're able to be a little bit more customized in terms of peer learning and sharing our institutional knowledge. Although Reverend Dr. Gunter and I have an extensive experience that ranges over 60 years, collectively, we don't know everything. And we don't claim to be the full authorities. We just have experiences that we share. And so we want to have a time at the end of this for you to also share your experiences and hopefully create an environment where we can learn from each other. So we do have only about 10 slides that we're sort of going through just to sort of lay the framework to give us some common language, but also to hopefully prime some questions and some discussions that we'll have later on in our discussion. Stephanie, can we go to the next slide, please? So, where and how do we develop this diverse relationship for recruitment? Do we invest in the authentic community of relationships, our tactics, community listening tables? Do we have warm intros, social justice listenings, things of that nature? Really, for me, it's really about building diverse leadership that starts way before the recruitment process.
Yeah.
So I'll just share another. So I didn't share my background, but my background is theater. So I spent over 25 years storytelling and sort of taking people through narratives. So I'm gonna always tell a story. So I have another story for you, and so please bear with me. But a small Chester County nonprofit that wanted a more diverse board realized that their events didn't reflect the broader community interest. So they began hosting community listening tables in diverse neighborhoods. No agenda, just conversation. And over time, the trust grew. Over time, the vulnerability grew. And over time, the relationships blossomed and new leaderships emerged authentically, not forced, but and not artificially, but authentically and intentionally. So relationships do take time to grow. What we're talking about is really planting a seed, planting the seeds today that will bear fruit tomorrow. So this isn't really like a one-time fix. It's not like, okay, I need to diversify my organization. I need to diversify my board. Ms. Kaya Scott, you're very well spoken. Would you like to join my board? Boom, we're diversified. And although Ms. Kaya Scott has extensive experience and she might love your organization, that's not how we recommend things to go, because that person might not have that great extensive knowledge, nor may they be really abreast with your mission and your vision of the organization. So we should make it a practice that every board member should know your mission and vision, should know it intimately, because when they go and develop these relationships, that's what they're talking about. And they want to find people that are interested in that mission and that are interested in that vision. And then they can become a part of that network. They can become a part of that initiative, not necessarily as a board member, but maybe as a supporter. Board members are volunteers. So there's a process that you find a way that, in developing this relationship where you're sort of dating one another and you're sort of finding, you're sort of learning the quirks and how each other moves, do they refill the toilet paper? Do they leave the toilet seat up? If that's a deal breaker, you might not want to pursue the relationship with that organization, right? Do they leave the toothpaste cap uncovered? Do they drink from the bottle? So of course, I'm joking and putting in these personal relationships, but really and truly, this is a personal union, because we're asking people to give their time, their energy, and themselves. We're asking people to be champions of the organization. And they're only able to do that if they're really and truly on board. So it's not really just asking someone, can you join the board? It's asking someone, are you on board with the mission? Are you on board with this initiative? Are you on board with the values of the organization?
Are we going to the next slide?
We are going to the next slide.
So this is a slide that I really appreciate because it provides nonprofits with ways of determining through their own self-assessment whether they're really welcoming and inclusive. And a lot of us want to be, we say that we are, but it turns out that when we recruit and add new board members, they're not very different from the current board. And so we don't really achieve the goal. So it does really begin, it's part of the work to do a self-assessment before you really go into board recruitment. And so one of the things that I think is really important is taking time with something like this really helps us to understand who we are as we go into the waters of, we want someone different, we want some diversity, we want to be inclusive. This will really help us to think about, are we really? And I think until we ask that question and answer it, we could end up recruiting people who, for lack of a better word, look just like us in terms of the board as it is, the board's characteristics when they start the process. So self-assessment, I think, is really important. I serve on 3 regional boards, and one of them is SEPTA. And the only question that they ask is, have you ever used SEPTA? And now that you live in Chester County, do you continue to use SEPTA? They weren't interested in anything else, but whether or not you were interested in public transportation as a system. And so sometimes it's preaching to the choir, because you've got the same people who think the same thing, trying to solve the same problem. And if you know anything about SEPTA and transportation these days, the problems that they're facing are much different than problems that they faced 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And so it's one of the reasons why it's really important to assess your current board and what you're really looking for, and then how to be welcoming, how to be inclusive. There is language that goes with that. There's a warmth that goes with being welcoming, with getting to know people. There's a whole sense of listening to people who are different than us as a way of preparing to have a more inclusive board. And so I would encourage you to really have some kind of self-assessment that really helps us to understand your readiness at that point.
On the Chester County Community Foundation's resource guide, there's not only this self-assessment, but there's also a board diversity matrix. I would recommend that you thumb through our resources. Not only will you find these, but you'll also find videos. You'll find other resources that I think will be extremely useful in this work. Before we go to the next slide, I think this will be my last story. So I've done some work in the past with an organization that's also very near and dear to my heart. And, so when we say, we want to say that we're welcoming, right? And it's easy for us to believe that we're welcoming, but what do our spaces actually say? What does our body language say? What does our social media presence say? So Chester County OIC is an organization that I've done some work with very closely within the past 5 years. And when you walk into Chester County OIC, you're greeted with multilingual signage. You're greeted with culturally inclusive artwork. You're greeted by a receptionist that is trained in inclusivity and hospitality. So it cultivates an environment where visitors feel seen, right? So before even you're interacted with a single program or, a single service is delivered, there's this welcoming message that you receive. There's this diverse message. And it's more than just a message. It's really dictated by the mindset, so that it's in the air, it's in the walls, it's in the feng shui of how the furniture is laid out. That it's not that I'm coming into a space, and this is the public spaces. Your office, you can do what you want, but in the public spaces, you don't want to have that barrier. So this is the type of intentional work that it takes that goes beyond the I'm going to bring somebody diverse on my board, because the welcoming and the inclusiveness is about how does that person feel when they are in that environment. What is their experience in that environment? Am I doing the work that it takes to welcome that person, or to welcome diverse thought, or to welcome potentially contradicting ideas? In this process of nonprofits, we try our best to be efficient, and we try our best to sort of get the work done. So a lot of times it's easier if Dr. Richelle and I are, of the same mind, and we think the same, and we talk the same, and we have a lot of the same cultural references, because it's easy for her to just give me a look. I know what she's talking about. Boom, we get it done. But because we're so close, we naturally have blinders to what Kurt might see, or what Ms. Kaya might see. So do we want a process that challenges the comfortability of the familiarity? So that's my soapbox. And now we can go to the next slide. We have only a couple more slides, and then we really want to open the room up to invite the wisdom of our participants. Dr. Gunter?
Yeah, so this particular slide is an attempt to really help us focus on retaining diverse leaders and retaining board members. And so I think one of the things that I mentioned to Ajene is that at the agency that I worked at, every time the leadership of the agency changed, so did the board membership. And so that board was more connected to the leader of the agency than to the work that the agency did, which made retaining people and creating a real sense of stability a challenge. And so retention is not based on who the leaders are. It's part of a good working relationship, not only among board members, but across employees and across the communities that we're serving. And so those relationships have to feel authentic for themselves. There have to be benefits. It has to be effective, and the work needs to feel substantive, but also like I've made an important contribution that everybody can celebrate. And so that means that we place our board right in the thick of it, not as some side group that's related to the nonprofit, but as an integral part of the work that the nonprofit is doing. And so it's really, really important. I tell this and I will admit, it's a very dated story about the fact that most of us appreciate the richness that comes in a garment that's made from many colors. And so the utility of something that's a solid color, just white, just black, just blue, just green or orange, the primary colors, that can get that doesn't have the same attraction as when we weave all of those colors together and create a garment that's really rich. And so I tell that story because that's what we want for our boards. We want a richness that comes with bringing in different perspectives and different communities and different ways of solving a problem. And if we ignore that, we're not likely to keep our board together, but we lose this opportunity to really have something that is valuable, not only to the agency that they're leading, but to the community abroad. And so you've got to retain, and you've got to do the same work that you did in recruiting in retaining. People have to feel like what they bring is really important to the board and to that nonprofit. So retention has to be grounded in the work that the group is doing together. And I hope that people will really take that to heart, because it can be really destabilizing if every time there's a change in leadership, there's also a change in board membership.
And I'm going to add to that by segueing us into an open discussion. Stephanie, I think what we want to do now is we're going to stop sharing, because the last slide is our closing slide. So we'll come back to sharing that towards the end. But I want us to sort of get into a conversation here for our final 15 minutes together. And I'm going to open us up by talking about retention. And the main word that I kept hearing Dr. Gunter say was work, working together, valued work, valued contribution. So in working together, I want to, as a board member, it's easier for me to be an effective board member if I can identify what my work is and how I'm contributing. Right? What is my role on this board? If you recruited me and if you asked me to join your board because I'm a Black man and my work is to be Black, it's you really are devaluing not only the impact of the work of the board, but also me as a human being. What I bring should be a contribution to the work and us working together. Me being Black is something that comes with the territory. But what am I doing? If I'm just being Black on the board, I have no work to do, and I'm just going to be me. We want to activate board members. We want people to have roles. We want people to have responsibilities. We want people to be actively contributing in a way that is in their wheelhouse. Okay? And that goes for, I actually went to school for accounting. Do I want to join the board to do accounting work? Nada. So we find a way for me to contribute to this mission that is something that I want to do. I might not want to be the person that is the Black voice in the room. That's, if I sign up for that and that's my work, fine. Right? If I am saying I want to be the advocate for the underrepresented voices, fine. But that don't just add me on to, don't just say, oh, Mr. Ajene Livingston, you're Black. Would you like to be on our board? All right, so I wanted to sort of get that out there. I wanted to put that out there. I want to sort of level set us a little bit so we can have a little bit of some honest conversation and some honest interaction in our last 15 minutes. There's no rhyme or reason. I hope that we stimulated some thought. I hope that we reaffirmed some of the key things that you already know so that you can stick to them and bring them back. And I hope that we shared something new with you that sparked and stimulated. So we're going to open the floor. Please just feel free to unmute yourself. If you are not comfortable talking or if you're not in a place where you can speak, feel free to chat. Stephanie's going to help us to monitor the chat. And let's hear from each other. Let's get some peer learning going on.
Ajene and Dr. Gunter, I have one question, and that is, how do you approach having that conversation with fellow board members on DEI? How would you suggest starting off?
That's a great question. I was wondering if that question would come up in light of sort of all that's going on around ideas about DEI. And I think that the way that that question is raised and answered is, how do we guarantee that we create a board that reflects the nonprofit, its qualities, the employees, the work that they do, and the community that they serve. Our boards should look like the communities where we provide services. And so that's the answer. You don't ever have to use DEI in your search. It's like, I want my board to look like the people that I serve and the people that I employ. And we know that there is a great variety of experiences and differences, and we want to bring that onto our board in order to make the work that we do better.
I would love to hear from the room, but I'm just going to say, if I am on a board where I have to introduce that conversation for the first time, there's bigger issues that we're facing there. But I'd love to hear, Donna, were you saying something or were you just?
No, I
laughing?
wasn't saying anything. I was just chuckling.
Thank you.
I agree with you. I will say, as long as I'm now on the microphone, that we had our annual meeting. I'm the president of the Players Club, a community theater in Swarthmore since 1911. So we have a long history. But we had our annual meeting back in March, and as part of my president's report, this was when there was a lot more talk than there is at the moment with regard to attacks really on DEI, right? And whether you could even say the word or should say those words or whatever. And so I made a commitment to the membership and to the organization and the board, obviously, that DEI would continue to be paramount for us. And really, diversity, equity, inclusion are just other words for the word all. We want all to feel welcome. We want all to feel as if their talents are respected, right? We choose, all people are invited both on stage, backstage, in volunteer capacities of any kind, and certainly in our audiences. So you don't have to use the word diversity, equity, inclusion. You just have to use the word all. And I think the bases are covered.
Thank you, Donna. Kurt.
Yes, I'd like to say something. I'm on the board for a dance company that started in 2019. Had to go virtual for 2 years. Dance is predominantly like a white girls venue. But one things that I did want to say that we are doing is that we're performing at a predominantly Black college, or we could investigate now more. You've opened my mind to perform at Black churches. Where my daughter teaches, she not only performs, but she teaches at studios that are predominantly Black. So I think we are doing what we can with a very small group of employees, of dancers. And of course, I'm 5 hours away from the venue, but at least what I was brought on the board for was to say, well, are we targeting a broader range of our potential audiences that would value what we're doing? Do we know the Christian radio stations in a 50-mile radius? Do we know the churches in a 50-mile radius? What are we doing to promote our value in those spaces and over those networks? So, I applaud you for what you're saying. I was like, oh, I gotta talk, but I'm glad I had this little opportunity to say, I'm not, I'm kind of patting myself on the back, but you've opened my mind to go back and tell, the staff that there are other opportunities, and, we're losing numbers in terms of our dancers, and so if we're going after the same carrot, that's probably why. We need to be encouraging and training and bringing up those people so that they can maybe start them as an apprentice or a trainee before they actually get to be a full-fledged company member. But that's my 2 cents worth, and good job, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Kurt.
One of the things that we did not talk about was advisory boards as a step to board membership. And so advisory boards can be a way of getting acquainted with potential members with potential board members. And it can be a real opportunity for members of advisory boards to get to know you and you to get to know them before promoting them to full board membership. But for many of us, we didn't come on boards right away. There was a 1-year period of getting to know each other before we stepped onto the boards, and there was some opportunity, some capacity to be in an advisory capacity, however you might look at that, before joining the full board. So that might be another way of recruiting more broadly and getting to know people and them getting to know you. I love the analogy of the dating, but that might be a way to date.
Hi, folks. I'm Megan, and I will say, so I'm on the board of the Colonial Theater in Phoenixville. I'm relatively new to the board, and I think in my mind, my disconnect is, so how do we recruit board members from the population that we serve? Awesome, that's easy, but how do we expand the population that we serve to include more diverse folks? Because that is the real disconnect. You can't get somebody who isn't excited about your mission, about your, in my, experience, but your venue, unless they're already into it. And so our challenge has been trying to establish, and we're working on it, we do lots of stuff, but I loved the idea of listening opportunities. And we did do that. We have a large Brazilian community in Phoenixville and growing. And we did set up a table out front of the theater with all in Spanish and Portuguese. We had 2 people actually on staff. And kind of people started, they didn't even have to really, once they saw the table in their own language, they knew that they could come up. And so that, but I think the challenge is trying to connect with the communities you wish to serve in a way that reaches them. Because just saying, we would love to have more, LGBTQ, members or folks from the Black community come to see our films, and we can put on films that we think they'll like. But if there's a disconnect, there's a disconnect, we're not getting it. And so I would love to hear anything that you have to say about that, because until you have people from a diverse communities that are interested in your mission, you can't get them on your board, right? And so it becomes harder anyway.
Donna, thank you very much. I see that you have to go. Well, I loved what Donna was saying about the work of removing our own bias, right? Sort of remove that, when we hear diversity, when we hear equity, when we hear inclusion, in this room, we think of, well, how do I get more Black people to join my board? Or we might go as far as saying, well, how do I get more young people to join my board? But so we have to sort of untrain ourselves, of what these words mean to us in terms of that work, because it's not just doing that, it's really reconditioning. And I loved what Kurt was talking about, which is how do we stretch across? How do we reach? How do we move from where we are to over there? And so, Megan, I can talk to you hours about, because we had a theater here in Coatesville where the community was not theater goers. So how did we do that? How did we have something in the community where it wasn't the culture. It's different in Malvern, it's different in Westchester, it's different in Phoenixville, but in Coatesville, how do you have a theater? So I will table that. But a good start, like you said, is listening, because you cannot do and you cannot act on what you don't know. So to shut our mouths and open our ears is definitely a good start. Kurt, what we do at the end, and Stephanie can speak to this, is we do have a resource opportunity. We're going to share the slides, although it's up on our website. If you want your information shared, we can publicly share your information. If you do not want that shared, just let us know and we will keep it private. But in our last couple minutes before we close out, I want to leave space if Robin, Sasha, Brian, or Kaya would like to say anything. I know, Kaya, we did go around the room and just briefly introduce ourselves. So if you just want to say your name, let people hear your voice, and if you have anything that you want to contribute, we'd love to hear it.
Hi, sorry I was a few minutes behind. My name is Kaya, Chester County resident, born and raised, currently in Coatesville for the last 20+ years. My background has been in nonprofit leadership, and I've done a bunch of consulting with organizations in the youth development, community organizing, grassroots, and arts and culture spaces. I'm so grateful to be here listening to this conversation, and I think it's definitely timely given where we are. I think the one thing that just continues to keep coming back for me is the conversation around like what diversity means for folks in the spaces and places, and equity and inclusion, and defining that for each organization, and then determining how best to have it live within the organization and the culture. Because often it is racial, but I think diversity of thought, perspective, experience, skills are equally as important in ensuring that a board can access a fuller network of spaces, places, funding opportunities, et cetera, to let the mission live. So that was the only other thing I wanted to offer, but I appreciate both Ajene, you and Reverend Gunter for your facilitation today.
Brian, did you want to share?
So I just share, I guess, legal aid's board is required. I'm not on the legal aid board, but we're required to have client board members as a part of the bylaws. And I haven't thought too far about it, but just wondering, is that risking tokenism where we have a client who's just supposed to stand in for every client that we have, where the legal needs, the people we serve, is a huge range of areas. Civil legal issues is very broad. And it's just, there are a similar requirement on Crime Victim Center, although I'm brand new there, so I don't know too much about it yet. I'm just becoming familiar. It just put into my head the idea of tokenism and what is the expectation of these board members, and how do we avoid that? How do we get value out of the position, make them feel valued? I don't know. It just triggered a bunch of thoughts in my head. So I guess that's my contribution. A lot to think about. So thank you.
It is a lot to think about, and it is why it's so much work. Because even what you talked about having a client, how do you choose the right client? How will you choose the client that understands that their responsibility is not just to represent their interests, but the interests of other clients as well? And so all of it requires work. And that's, if you hear anything today, is that choosing a board member is not easy. It's not simple. It requires a lot of intentionality, a lot of work to create a space where board members can feel valued, and that and that we're here to help. The resources that we have on our website and the information that we can provide is designed to help. And so don't feel like you're in it alone. There's some great resources at Chester County Community Foundation, and we'd love to be a part of helping you think about the work that you do.
Our next Zoom meeting, speaking of resources, is May 19th on internal controls and audits. I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon and just remind you that this DEI work isn't a sprint, it's a legacy project. Thank you. Feel free to stay on any longer if you want to chat, but I want to release folks that have prior obligations. And Stephanie, we can stop the recording now if you don't mind.